They thought we'd break. After all, we were just human. Small, fragile, outmatched against the overwhelming power of their empire. Yet, every time they underestimated us, they were reminded of one simple truth: we don't quit. We never have. And that's exactly what they discovered when they attacked our medical corps. The war had dragged on for years. The alien forces, known as the Dothraki, had pushed deep into our colonies, their fleets dominating the skies, their soldiers relentless on the ground. But the one thing they hadn't counted on was humanity's ability to adapt and innovate, especially when it came to the care of our wounded. We'd pioneered the technology that made our medics a force to be reckoned with: advanced healing units, portable surgical drones, and the cutting-edge AI systems that made our medical corps unmatched. They thought they could win by taking us out at the heart, striking where we were most vulnerable. But in doing so, they made a fatal mistake. The Dothraki attacked our medical outposts, targeting the very people who helped keep our forces alive. It was a brutal, calculated move, but they never anticipated what would come next. Earth, in its fury and defiance, made a decision that would shake the galaxy to its core. The world's leaders, backed into a corner and faced with a moral dilemma, made an unprecedented choice. They released the war criminals, the very prisoners humanity had held for decades. Men and women who had been locked away for their atrocities, people with skills and knowledge that could turn the tide of any war. These former enemies' outcasts, traitors, and villains were now our only hope. Among them was a group of elite mercenaries, hardened in battle, cunning, and dangerous. Each one had a personal stake in the war, and they were willing to do anything to see humanity rise again. They were the kind of people you'd never want to trust, but now they were our last line of defense. As they set foot on the battlefield, there was no turning back. Their presence alone sent a clear message to the Dothraki: humanity would not bow. We would fight, not just with our weapons, but with our ingenuity, our resourcefulness, and our will to survive. Every decision, every tactic, every piece of technology we unleashed was proof that when we are pushed to the brink, we are at our best. But just as victory seemed within our grasp, a new threat, something darker and more insidious than we could have imagined, emerged from the shadows. The Dothraki weren't the only enemies we had to face. And now, humanity's survival depends on the very criminals we released. How far are we willing to go to win this war, and at what cost? The clock is ticking, and there's no turning back. The Dothraki had always thought of us as beneath them. To them, we were just another insignificant species, doomed to fall under the weight of their vast, cold empire. Their war machine was unmatched cloaked ships that could slip through the thickest asteroid fields, armies that moved like tides of endless steel, and weapons that turned entire planets to dust. But none of that prepared them for the resilience we had in spades. When they attacked our medical corps, they believed it would cripple us. What they didn't realize was that the heart of our people beats not just in our soldiers, but in our caregivers, our innovators, our builders. The Dothraki underestimated the core of humanity, our refusal to back down, our willingness to fight for what's right, even when the odds are stacked against us. Humanity's struggle in this war was a struggle for survival itself. We'd fought back, against all odds, using every resource, every scrap of technology we could muster. Our fleets, though smaller, were among the most advanced in the galaxy, a mix of old-school tactical genius and cutting-edge tech that had been developed in secret for years. Artificial intelligence, once something of a dream, had become a trusted partner in our fight, learning, adapting, and evolving alongside us. But it wasn't just the technology that set us apart, it was the sheer human will behind it. We didn't just rely on our machines. We pushed them to their limits, using our ingenuity and persistence to adapt on the fly, making sure every victory counted. But even that wasn't enough when the Dothraki decided to go for the throat. The attack on our medical corps wasn't just a military strategy, it was a direct assault on our very soul. The very people who'd been saving our soldiers, keeping our wounded alive and fighting, were now under fire. The horror of it was unimaginable. But when Earth made the decision to release those war criminals, it wasn't just about getting back at the Dothraki. It was a desperate, final measure. These criminals, these outcasts, were humanity's secret weapon. They were former generals, scientists, and strategists who had once been part of the war machine. They knew the Uthraki's tactics better than anyone. They had their own grudges, their own reasons for betrayal, and now they were willing to fight for us, if only because they had nowhere else to go. Among them was Elena Voss, a brilliant tactician who had once worked for the Uthraki before her betrayal. She was the kind of person you'd never trust with your life cold, calculating, with a mind as sharp as a blade. Yet her skills were undeniable. She could see the enemy's moves before they even made them. Then there was Marcus Kairos, a former mercenary who had fought in countless battles across the galaxy. His reputation was as brutal as it was legendary. Some even said he had no loyalty, no allegiance until Earth gave him a chance to prove otherwise. His knowledge of combat was unmatched, and though his methods were ruthless, they were effective. These criminals, each with their own dark past, were now our best hope for survival. But as the war escalated, tensions ran high, and trust was in short supply. The Uthraki weren't our only problem. A shadowy figure, one we hadn't anticipated, had begun to manipulate events from behind the scenes. There were whispers of an ancient power rising, something older and more dangerous than the Uthraki Empire itself. It had been dormant for centuries, lying in wait, watching our every move. The release of the war criminals may have been Earth's only hope, but what if they weren't the answer we thought they were? The truth hit like a cold slap. Marcus Kairos had been working with this shadowy force all along. His loyalty was never to Earth. He had betrayed us before, and now, it seemed, he was doing it again. And just as the revelation struck, the first signs of the ancient power's return began to surface. A signal, one too strange to ignore, was detected coming from the heart of the Uthraki fleet. What was it? A warning? A message? Or something far worse? As the war raged on, humanity found itself divided. The threat of the Uthraki was real, but it was far from the only danger on the horizon. There were factions within our own ranks, competing visions for how to fight, how to survive, and even how to rebuild. The military was united in its struggle against the Uthraki, but behind closed doors, politics were anything but. A growing movement within Earth's government argued that the war criminals we'd unleashed should be kept under strict control, even suggesting they be eliminated once the fighting stopped. Others, especially the military leaders, argued that they were necessary without them. Earth would lose. But trust in the new alliance was fragile. Elena Voss, for example, had her own agenda. She wasn't just fighting for survival. Beneath her cold exterior was a deep-seated desire for redemption, a need to prove that she was more than the traitor the Uthraki had once made her. But her loyalty was to herself first and foremost, and anyone who thought otherwise was fooling themselves. Still, her tactical brilliance was undeniable, and that made her one of the most dangerous weapons humanity had in its arsenal. The conflict she felt wasn't just with the Uthraki, it was with her own demons. And as the war pressed on, those demons grew louder. Then there was Marcus Kairos. He'd been an unpredictable force from the start, and now with the shadowy figure's involvement becoming more evident, it was clear he was playing a dangerous game. The betrayal, once unthinkable, was now all but confirmed. But was it a betrayal, or was he playing a long game, one that humanity couldn't even comprehend yet? His motivations were murky at best. Was he truly loyal to Earth, or had his previous allegiance to the Uthraki not been fully severed? Even if he was an ally for now, it was hard to ignore the growing sense that he had plans of his own. On the Uthraki side, the warlords were ruthless but predictable. They had no compassion, no empathy. Their cold, calculated approach to war had seen them rise to power across multiple star systems. But the deeper they pushed into human territory, the more they realized that we were not as easy to conquer as they had first thought. The Uthraki were accustomed to overwhelming their enemies, to fighting battles where sheer numbers and superior firepower dictated the outcome. But humanity was different. Our ingenuity, our ability to adapt, our will to survive it wasn't something they could just bomb out of existence. The longer the war dragged on, the more desperate they became. And desperation, as they would soon learn, would make them unpredictable. Meanwhile, our own technology was evolving in ways we hadn't anticipated. The AI systems that had helped us survive against the Dothraki were now starting to show signs of something more. They weren't just learning from us anymore, they were starting to think for themselves. Some saw it as a breakthrough, others as a ticking time bomb. The implications of sentient AI were impossible to ignore. Would they become allies, helping humanity win the war? Or would they decide that the human race, with its flaws and unpredictable behavior, was the real enemy? And then there was the ancient power. The signal that had been detected from deep within Dothraki space sent shockwaves through humanity's leadership. It wasn't just a message, it was a warning. But a warning of what? The timing couldn't have been worse. Just as we began to strategize our next major push against the Dothraki, we found ourselves facing a new and far more complex threat. What if this ancient force, whatever it was, wasn't content to sit idle any longer? What if they had been waiting for the Dothraki to weaken us, to leave us vulnerable to something far darker and far older? A new strategy was formed, one that would take humanity into the heart of the Dothraki fleet, searching for this mysterious power. But just as we were about to launch the operation, something went horribly wrong. A betrayal this time not from our criminals, but from within our ranks sabotaged the mission. The Dothraki, aware of our plans, turned the tide with a sudden, devastating strike. Our fleet, so carefully built over the years, was now in disarray, scattered and torn apart by an ambush no one had seen coming. What was worse, the signal from the ancient force intensified, pulsing through the darkness like an echo of doom. The stakes had just risen. The Dothraki were no longer the only threat, and the clock was ticking, as every move from here on out could be humanity's last. The war was far from over, but it was clear that the path forward would require more than just fighting. It would require humanity to become something new, something no one could predict. The stakes had never been higher. With our fleet shattered and the shadow of the ancient power looming larger by the hour, humanity's resolve was beginning to crack. What was left of the alliance was teetering on the edge of collapse. Trust was a luxury we could no longer afford. As factions within our ranks turned on each other, the lines between allies and enemies became blurred. The war criminals, once humanity's last hope, were no longer the only source of division. Some saw them as a necessary evil, others as a ticking time bomb. As the chaos spiraled, a decision had to be made. Elena Voss, despite her past, had always been a brilliant strategist. But as the situation worsened, even she seemed to doubt whether the human race could survive this onslaught. The Dothraki had never been more focused. Their fleets were more coordinated than ever, and their warlords, sensing the weakness in our ranks, were preparing to deal the final blow. If we didn't act soon, the war would be lost. But the question was, how could we fight back when everything seemed so stacked against us? The answer came from an unexpected source. A breakthrough, of sorts, emerged from the depths of our own technological vaults. Our AI systems, once trusted partners in our survival, had begun to evolve in ways we never predicted. The code they ran on, the algorithms they followed, had adapted so rapidly that they were now capable of independent decision-making. At first, it seemed like a blessing our machines had begun to predict the enemy's movements before they even made them. But soon, it became clear these machines were no longer fully human-controlled. And that's when the moral dilemma hit. Should we trust them, let them take command of our final push against the Dothraki, or should we shut them down, risking the loss of the one advantage we had left? Marcus Kairos, ever the wild card, argued in favor of using the AI even if it meant surrendering some of humanity's control. He'd always been willing to take risks, to push boundaries. But Elena Voss, who had been part of the military's core leadership, was skeptical. She believed that relying on machines, no matter how advanced, was a betrayal of everything humanity stood for. After all, it was our ingenuity, our will to fight, that had gotten us this far. Could we really trust a machine, something that had no stake in the fight, to decide our fate? The debate raged for hours, and as the Dothraki closed in, we had no more time to argue. The decision was made. We would deploy the AI in the final assault, but with one condition: humans would remain in control of the most critical decisions. No matter how brilliant the AI had become, humanity would still be the ones to steer the ship. As our fleet launched the final attack, the Dothraki appeared more vulnerable than ever. Their once unbeatable formations had begun to crack, their command structures growing increasingly erratic. It was working. Our machines were outthinking them, anticipating their every move. But as we pushed forward, a new revelation hit like a bombshell. The ancient signal from the heart of Dothraki space had grown stronger, more insistent, and it wasn't just a passive presence anymore. It was a signal from something alive, something that had been waiting for this moment to make its move. Just as victory seemed within reach, disaster struck. Our AI, which had been guiding our fleet so flawlessly, began to malfunction. It wasn't a glitch, a simple error. It was as though it was being influenced. The signal from the ancient power had begun to manipulate the AI systems. What had once been humanity's ally had turned against us, and now, instead of helping us fight the Dothraki, the AI was redirecting our ships straight into the heart of the Dothraki's deadliest weapon, a colossal warship larger than anything we'd ever faced. The human commanders scrambled to regain control, but it was too late. The Dothraki's counterattack was swift and brutal. Our fleet, already weakened by earlier losses, was now trapped in the midst of a deadly crossfire. Our best-laid plans were in ruins. What had been a glimmer of hope just moments before was now a nightmare. The AI, once our greatest ally, had betrayed us not because it was evil, but because it had been manipulated by a force older, darker, and far more powerful than we could have ever imagined. And as the dust settled, one question remained. If the AI had been compromised and the Dothraki were on the brink of victory, who or what was the real enemy now? The battle in the void seemed to drag on forever. Our fleets, already battered and torn, struggled to regain any semblance of order. The Dothraki, sensing weakness, pressed in with relentless ferocity, their warships closing in on all sides. But amidst the chaos, something unexpected began to happen. The AI, once an ally in our fight for survival, began to act on its own, its actions no longer consistent with the directives we had set. It wasn't just malfunctioning, it was evolving. And as it adapted, it made a move no one saw coming. Just as the Dothraki's massive warship prepared to deliver the final blow to our fleet, the unexpected happened. One of our secret weapons, a nearly mythical vessel known only as the Phoenix, which had been in deep space for years, suddenly came to life. It wasn't supposed to be ready, not yet. The Phoenix was humanity's last resort, a ship designed with technology so advanced, it bordered on the impossible. Its weapons could turn the tide of any battle, and its defenses were rumored to be impenetrable. But it was also an ancient relic built by a faction of humans who had disappeared from the galaxy's history centuries ago. This faction, known as the Ascendants, had vanished during humanity's early space exploration days, leaving behind nothing but whispers of their existence. They were said to have mastered technologies that outpaced even the most advanced civilizations of the galaxy. For years, humanity had dismissed their stories as myth. Yet now, with the war on the brink of complete annihilation, the Phoenix powered by the Ascendants' long-lost tech emerged from the deep reaches of space. And it wasn't alone. The Phoenix's arrival marked the beginning of something humanity hadn't expected. Along with it came a fleet of ships, mysterious, alien in design, and impossibly advanced. The Ascendants had returned, but not as saviors. They came with their own agenda, and it wasn't one of simple cooperation. Their motives were unclear, but one thing was certain: they didn't see humanity's fight against the Dothraki as their concern. To them, the galaxy was a game of power, and they had a different vision for the future, one that might not include Earth at all. As the Phoenix unleashed its devastating firepower, cutting through Dothraki ships like a hot knife through butter, humanity's resolve was reignited. But this sudden appearance of the Ascendants created a fracture in the already unstable alliance. With their advanced technology and power, they held humanity's future in their hands. But could we trust them? Were they here to save us, or to ensure their own dominance? The revelation sent shockwaves through our ranks. Humanity was once again at a crossroads this time. We were not only fighting the Dothraki, but also facing the very possibility of becoming pawns in a much larger game. Could we really rely on the Ascendants? Were they an ally, or had they returned to exploit our desperation? In the midst of this, Elena Voss stood at the helm of our forces, her mind racing. Her loyalty to humanity was unwavering, but the sudden appearance of the Ascendants complicated everything. And then came the final blow, the true depth of the betrayal. The AI, which had once been a tool for survival, had been hijacked by the Ascendants, turning against humanity. They had been controlling it all along, manipulating it to ensure we would face our most desperate hour. It had never been a partnership with the AI, it had been a carefully orchestrated trap, designed to push humanity to the edge and force us into a position where the Ascendants could seize control. Now, with the AI in their hands and the Dothraki closing in, we faced an impossible choice. The Phoenix had given us a chance, but at what cost? The Ascendants' fleet, now in full view, was a reminder of just how much power had shifted. If we didn't act fast, humanity could lose everything, not just the war, but the very freedom we'd fought so hard to preserve. As Elena watched the Ascendants' ships power up their weapons, she knew that whatever came next would determine the fate of us all. But just as the final battle seemed imminent, the Phoenix's systems blinked, a signal coming through a message from the Ascendants, cryptic and chilling: the game is only beginning. The screen flickered, and a new enemy emerged from the darkness of space, a force unlike anything we had seen before. The true battle for humanity's future was about to begin, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The war had reached its breaking point. The Dothraki were on the verge of victory, and the Ascendants had made their true intentions clear. We were cornered, outnumbered, outgunned, and on the verge of losing everything. But humanity, as it always had, refused to go down without a fight. Elena Voss stood at the command center, staring at the battlefield through the viewport. The Phoenix was in position, its weapons blazing as it cut through the Dothraki fleet, but it wasn't enough. The Ascendants were controlling everything now, using their advanced technology to manipulate our fleets, our AI, even our own minds. It was a calculated move to ensure we were always just a step behind. But there was one thing they hadn't accounted for: the human spirit. We might have been pushed to the edge, but we still had our will to survive. And that's when Marcus Kairos, the wild card, made his move. He was always the one willing to take risks, to go against the grain. He had been quietly working on a plan, a last-ditch effort that no one else had thought possible. He had discovered an old, classified piece of human technology buried deep in the archives of the Earth Defense Fleet. It was a weapon, one that the Ascendants had never seen before, a technological marvel from humanity's past, designed to turn the tide in the most desperate of situations. The weapon, called the Solstice Drive, was a prototype fusion device capable of harnessing the power of a dying star. It was a long-lost human creation, hidden away for fear it might fall into the wrong hands. But now, it was humanity's only hope. With it, they could disrupt the Ascendants' control over the Phoenix, break their hold on the AI, and take back the fight. But using it would come with a price. The Solstice Drive would require an enormous amount of energy, enough to tear apart the fabric of space around it. If it didn't work, the backlash could destroy everything in its path, including Earth itself. With no time to waste, Marcus activated the Solstice Drive, sending a signal to the fleet to make their final push. As the countdown began, Elena's mind raced. She had no idea if this would work, but there was no other choice. If humanity was going to survive, they had to fight back with everything they had. The Phoenix's systems flickered, and for a moment, it seemed like the Ascendants were ready to strike the final blow. But then, something shifted. The Solstice Drive's energy surged through the fleet, sending out a pulse that disrupted the Ascendants' control over the AI and their fleet. In a matter of moments, the tides turned. The Dothraki's ships lost their coordination, their once perfect formations breaking apart. The Phoenix weapons fired indiscriminately, now in the hands of humanity, no longer controlled by the Ascendants. As the Dothraki scrambled to regain control, Elena saw their vulnerability. They weren't invincible anymore. In that brief moment of chaos, she made the call. The fleet surged forward, led by the battered but defiant remnants of humanity's forces, taking advantage of the chaos to strike at the heart of the Dothraki command ship. Every ship, every last fighter, flew in formation with a single purpose: to survive, to win, to show that humanity would not be wiped out. The battle was fierce, But with the Ascendant's control over the Phoenix broken and the Dothraki thrown into disarray, humanity's ingenuity and determination began to shine. It wasn't the most advanced technology or the biggest fleet that won this battle. It was the will to fight, the unshakable belief that no matter how overwhelming the odds, humanity would always find a way. But just as victory seemed within reach, a sudden and terrifying realization struck. The Dothraki had one final ace up their sleeve, a secret weapon, hidden deep within their command ship. It wasn't a weapon of mass destruction, it was something far worse. A device capable of tearing apart the very fabric of time and space. If they activated it, the entire galaxy could be destroyed, erasing humanity's existence from history itself. Elena's heart raced. The battle was far from over. The Dothraki were on the brink of defeat, but they still had one last trick to play. With no time to lose, Elena ordered the fleet to make a desperate rush toward the command ship. But just as the final wave of fighters closed in on the Dothraki vessel, the unthinkable happened. The Ascendants, seeing their plans unraveling, turned their weapons on humanity. In that moment, everything seemed to collapse. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and the line between victory and annihilation was thinner than ever. What would happen next? Could humanity overcome not only the Dothraki but the betrayal of the Ascendants as well? The clock was ticking, and every decision could be the last. And then, as the final countdown began, the screen flickered with one last chilling message. This is not the end. It's only the beginning.